Well, moving on to other news, a gay teacher speaks out tonight after he's verbally vilified at a school board meeting.
An openly gay teacher is at the center of a curriculum controversy that involves the role of gays and lesbians in history.
5 months ago, 29-year-old Rodney Wilson shocked a lot of people when he told some of his classes he's gay.
Teacher in a Melville public school who told his class that he was a homosexual. We're talking about Melville Public School, or he's a polygamist, or he's a pedophile, or whatever. This is totally
That's right.
inappropriate.
And that was bad taste and bad judgment on the part of the teacher. He should have been reprimanded or maybe fired. I don't know.
They don't want gays teaching their kids, playing with their kids, or even occupying the same room with their kids.
Coming up, could this history teacher be history because he came out of the closet in class? Do gay teachers belong at the head of the class?
I don't want a queer within a mile of me. That's something I heard my dad say a lot in the 1970s when I was a boy. He also warned me to stay away from a particular player on his softball team that he thought might be queer. And I remember the Anita Bryant 1977 Save Our Children campaign in Florida. What I took away from that controversy was, to me, a frightening understanding that a lot of people thought that gay people were dangerous, especially around children. The next year, the Briggs Initiative out in California, which was specifically about gay and lesbian people and if they should be allowed to teach in public school, sent the same message into my 13-year-old brain. Gay people are so dangerous, they should not be in a classroom. So I took all of these awful lessons with me into an otherwise good high school experience in the early 1980s, but I knew that something terrible about me had to remain hidden. I was somehow damaged or broken, and there was one thing I knew for sure: gay people could never be teachers. Room number 115 when I was here, 1990, 97. Now it looks like it's 216. Right out of college, yeah. For any teacher, the first year it's overwhelming. It looks a lot smaller than I remember it. The windows I had were rusty and old. This wonderful quadrangle out here was just a bunch of cars parked all day.
My first impression of Mr. Wilson was that he was young and he was very exciting to listen to.
We did not have internet, we did not have Google, we didn't have computers, we didn't have smartphones. I had a simple projector with transparencies that I would use. I wanted to do so well. I wanted to make my students excited. I wanted to help change the world by being a teacher.
He wanted to do projects and presentations, and so trying to tie it into what things were going on in our lives today, or at that time.
I mean, it was very engaging for sure. Interacted with his kids all the time. I mean, his classroom was always full of things for kids to look at and be involved in, and just bringing life into his subject matter.
Well, the first thing you're trying to do is, of course, capture their attention and keep their attention. I was always trying to get the students to understand that history was about something that was real and meaningful and even pertinent to their lives today.
One example of that, he had us recreate protest posters from the 50s, 60s, 70s to kind of help the story come alive.
The poster project was something I did near the end of every year, in which I would have students redesign actual protest posters.
Make us feel a little bit more like we were there, maybe what it might have been like to be protesting that particular event in time. So it really brought us into the story.
They'd choose the ones they wanted to do, and they would have to make it look identical to the original. And then they would give a little presentation, say, here's the poster, and this is the time period, this is what the poster was about.
He did a lot with current events, and that was a big part of the classroom. He wanted us to read the newspaper and read Newsweek, and encouraged us to have subscriptions to those at our houses so that we were always kind of up to date. And I know that he also encouraged us to watch programs on PBS not things that typical freshmen in high school would watch, but, you know, hey, watch this and, you know, write something about it.
So I think it was over 2 class periods, we had watched a movie, Escape from Sobibor, and talking about concentration camps, obviously, and the different people in them. And once the movie was over, we had had a discussion in class. I remember it very distinctly. I was in the front and he sat pretty much right to my right, and went through one of the many posters in the classroom that had examples of different patches that people were imprisoned with and branded with in the concentration camps. One of them happened to be a pink triangle, and he just kind of casually slipped it in there that had he been in that vicinity at the time, he would have been branded with that patch. And then kind of paused and let that sink in for a moment. And we got it, but did we hear that? Is that what happened?
He had given us a paper that had listed all the different patches that people would wear if they were Jewish, if they were a gypsy, if they had a disability, if they were homosexual. And he said, you know, we're all sitting there and we're looking at, you know, this paper, and I remember him saying, if I would have been in a concentration camp during the Holocaust, I would have had a pink triangle on my coat. And so, of course, you know, we all look at our paper like, pink triangle, you know, and I think everybody just was like, we felt like, well, we thought we knew him, you know, for so long, and then this was kind of this really, you know, for that time and for us in his classroom, kind of earth-shattering.
At that time period, people didn't really know how to react, didn't know what to say, and that includes faculty, staff, and the students. So I would say there's a lot of uncertainty as to how the community would accept, and quite frankly, how some of the faculty and staff would accept.
We do not need this in our school. This is not quality education, and this has no value at all for our children.
Rodney Wilson is a history teacher here who told his students that if he were alive during Hitler's Germany, he would have been persecuted by the Nazis because he is a homosexual.
Yeah, and it became a big deal, and I remember in the beginning the students kind of were a little bit taken aback, a little bit surprised, some didn't care, some probably got angry, and I heard from other people that there had been angry letters or mean things slipped under his door or whatnot, but the parents, I guess, there was an uproar about that, and it became a much larger scandal than it needed to be, and it really blew up.
And if you have a Bible, I ask you to read 1 Corinthians, and it'll tell you it is not right. The alternative lifestyle that they speak about is not a natural alternative lifestyle. It's an unnatural lifestyle.
I grew up in a Southern Baptist home that I thought, well, that's it. He's going to hell. I mean, he just told me.
There was, at that time, quite a variety of things being said in the teachers' workroom. Some people, and I would say most teachers actually were very supportive. But of course, you always had teachers that were, I can't believe a gay person is teaching in my school.
There was not a whole lot said, if I recall, officially, you know, through the chain of command or what have you, because I guess, in a sense, it was still a personnel issue, you know, so those kind of things you don't talk about with the other staff, kind of a thing, privacy, you know, sort of thing. But obviously something like that, at that time especially, was going to be news, one way or the other.
You cannot be honest to the historical record and not say in the 1960s, when all of these other groups of Americans began to agitate for their constitutional rights, their God-given rights, you cannot do that and leave out one group simply because that might be considered controversial or it might bring on inconvenience.
With some of the other gay and lesbian teachers in our building, I think they were really concerned about acceptance. it was almost like don't ask, don't tell, to be honest with you, in the Melville School District at that time period. And so whether you, as a teacher or as a student or as a community member, wanted to believe it or not, Rodney was the first person that had enough, I guess, guts to come out and say, this is who I am, and accept me for who I am.
We supported him. A lot of us were active in our NEA, so in our union, and that was a place where we tried to support him too, because what was happening we all felt was just not right.
If you're going back 20 years ago, no doubt it was, even though it's a public school, that religious overtone did make its way into Melville High School for sure back then.
I think the response from the parents depended on who they were and who their kids were and how the kids were responding. So,
it's not right, and my kids don't like it.
So if that group of kids was responding negatively, then the parents just kind of jumped on board.
I'm sure there were parents out there that believed, that, I can't have a gay person teach my son or daughter because they might turn gay and things like that. That kind of, I guess, scare tactic. But for the most part, what I really remember is more religious-based reasons and rationales why they did not want their son or daughter being taught by somebody that was gay or lesbian.
People back then sometimes equated, a lot of people, well, maybe some still do, but equated being gay with, potentially being like a child molester or something of that nature. And, it's like, well, I'm sure there was some of that and concern about what he was telling the students or talking, probably more of that than anything else.
And one of the reasons they're afraid of you is that you're a very good teacher, that you're going to somehow recruit them. That's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
I think the administrators, I don't know if they knew what to do, to be honest with you. I think they thought they were supposed to be behaving one way, but yet their personal views may have they wanted to maybe behave a different way. And so I think that is hard. It's probably why I don't want to be an administrator, because it's hard to live who you are, being put in this box of you're supposed to uphold these things that we think as a community are what you're supposed to be doing.
I now know that he had to go to the administration, he had to go to the board. I sit on a school board now in a neighboring district. Like, that would definitely have been something that you have to sit and talk about. And that your job's on the line at that point.
Here's central office, and that's where the board would meet. So from time to time there would be some pretty raucous meetings there with community members who were not impressed with what I had done. And in my last conversation with my father before he died in 2004, the very last conversation with him over the phone, he told me something that I had not known. He used to park here across Lee May Ferry with a gun, of course, because he was a countryman, and he would watch as I came out of school, usually parked right here. He would watch as I came out to make sure I got into my car safely and no one did anything to me.
I don't know if I was ever scared for Rodney. I think that's a poor term. I think I was concerned for Rodney. But I also knew Rodney's character, and he was a strong man. And at the end of the day, I had no doubt that he would get through, whether it be parent-teacher night or whatever type of situation that was going to occur that school year.
And I remember there was a picture once I had to do, and I was sitting right here with all of this back behind me, and I was just wondering, okay, the media is interested in this, fine, but what does it do about my own employment and my own situation?
Now, school officials tell me that Wilson does have a contract to teach this year.
I don't remember how long after the coming out was that the media picked up on it.
It sounded like he was being sexual about it. Well, I think the issue at the time... How can you not be sexual about saying I'm a homosexual? It's no different than him talking about his... People expect teachers to talk about their frame of reference if they're married and the subject of marriage comes up. Subject matter that is in the textbooks that kids don't know. We've gone crazy. Do you mind? Okay, should a teacher not be able to tell his class that he's married? No wonder our children are ignorant if that's what's being discussed in the classroom.
Absolutely.
I know I actually still, like a local paper called the Riverfront Times, I still have that to this day with him, my teacher, on the cover, and I was actually really, really proud of him. But he was on talk shows, he was on Dateline, and it was just crazy that all of this was coming out of such a minor event, what I thought should have been a minor event, but he was a pioneer.
What this teacher said to a classroom full of students could close the book on his career. How would you feel if your child were in his class?
So how would you feel if your child's teacher told the class that he was gay? For my next guest, revealing his sexuality to his classroom almost got him fired, until his own students fought to save his job.
I think it's a natural phenomenon for people to fear what they don't know.
And for me, being a young teacher as well, like I wanted to connect with my students any way that I could. And who cares what my background was? So who cares what anybody else's background was?
I remember being pretty adamant about what I believed at the time and writing something in a paper at the end of the school year, like, you know, the Bible says, this is what the Bible says. And I know about 5 years ago, I sent Rodney a message and just said, I'm really sorry because I don't believe that anymore. And he's like, I don't even remember you saying anything. But it was something that weighed on me for a really long time.
The granting of tenure was something a lot of us talked about, for sure.
If my free speech is curtailed in the classroom, then the free speech of every other teacher in the Melville School District or in any other district, their free speech could be curtailed as well.
Especially with that NEA piece, with that union piece, people that were really active with that really were trying to protect his job. And honestly, in our district, I think people that are part of that NEA do get looked at as, we really shouldn't touch them because they knew we had a big voice. And we had a bigger voice back then, I think, as a union in the 90s. So I think he was kind of protected because of that in a way, and not that anything that happened was protecting him necessarily, but I think not losing his tenure was because of that group backing him.
I really think, you know, being a great teacher like Rodney was definitely helped him in the classroom and definitely helped, I don't know, save his job is a good way to put it, but maybe make it more difficult to get rid of Rodney, which became almost an impossibility.
The Melville School Board wins praise for protecting a history teacher's civil rights. The Melville teacher who told his students he's gay gets a tenured job in the South County District.
It's being called a victory for gays and lesbians tonight.
Although Wilson was reprimanded for discussing personal matters in class, he still feels it was appropriate.
I did not get fired.
When I hear about everything that Rodney went through, I find it hard to think about it still being at this school, because I came in on my first interview and I talked about my husband. In my first interview, I talked about him, and he's a tech director, and how he would be a benefit, and I knew that it wasn't something I was going to shrink back from.
When I hear about what Rodney went through, it makes me feel really good today about our teachers that can feel comfortable, and again, a place where they feel okay being out, being who they are, not having to feel like they have to hide anything.
I feel safe, I feel protected. I know I've always been open and honest with the administration, and they've always known who I am and who my partner is. And it's never been a concern or something that I felt would come back to me.
We've just grown on the fact that we accept people here. And I think as a teacher, I see that happen. And I work closely with kids and student council for sure. That's one thing I impress upon them always, is who cares what people associate with. It's who they are inside that matters.
Josie Talvey Goodman came to me and wanted to know if she could start a club for kids. And here we call it A Place for All.
It's the equivalent of GSA, which is Gay Straight Alliance. It's a group that houses the community for the LGBTQ community at our school.
As freshmen in high school, they're talking about being gay, about being lesbian. Students that on the first day of class got up and introduced themselves as being transgender and stood there in front of the entire class of 30, 35 students and, you know, welcomed any questions that they had.
One of the students who started the emails with teachers to communicate and just to introduce himself is a trans boy, and he went out for the boys tennis team and he was allowed to be on it, and he's the first trans anyone to ever be on a Melville sports team, which is really huge.
I think that shows a lot of progress over the past 14 years since I've been here.
It's important for me because I want all kids to feel comfortable at school. You can't learn if you don't feel comfortable, and you have to feel like it's a place you want to be. And it's really important to me that Josie's created a place where those kids want to come. It's one of the more popular clubs that's after school, that's not a sports club, meets on a regular basis, really good attendance, and they just feel comfortable. It makes the kids feel like they have a place of their own.
So he really made a point to stay the course and shine a light and say, I'm not going to back down. I am who I am. I'm not alone. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with me. And I respected him already. I respected him so much more. Respected him to this day.
Nothing is more rewarding than having a student who was in your classroom 25 years ago make contact with you again, which happens a lot now because of Facebook, and say, you did this or you said this, and I still remember it. It still has meaning in my life. It did make me a better person. And you don't even have any memory of that event at all. You don't have any idea what they're talking about because you're one teacher, and maybe in the course, for example, of my 7 years here, I might have had 1,000 students come through my classroom. So the teacher can't remember, but to know that the student remembers, yeah, is deeply meaningful. Or to have students come back who are gay, for example, who did not say that to anyone in 1996 at this school. There were no openly LGBT teachers or students in this school that I'm aware of. To have them come back and say, I actually was lesbian or gay, and knowing that you were there, knowing that someone could be open about who they are, even though I never said anything at the time, had great meaning and actually helped me get through my life.
These are the signs the Nazis used. Jews, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexual. I wear this pink triangle because I'm gay.
What happened to you?
Well, I was reprimanded by the Central Office Administration. My coming out was called inappropriate classroom conduct.
Melville School District considers it inappropriate conduct for a teacher to discuss facts and beliefs of a personal nature in the classroom. Wilson fired back 28 pages of questions.
I asked them if a Polish person had said, as a Pole, I would have been among the persecuted groups, would that have been inappropriate classroom conduct? I asked them if a Jewish person had said that, would that have been inappropriate classroom conduct?
There were no answers. Instead, in early June, this letter from the school board's lawyers. The school district has no obligation to specifically respond to the questions and will not do so.
I think, honestly, he was so brave to do that, and it seems silly now. I guess it really doesn't, but that somebody would have to be considered brave to say such a simple thing about themselves. It shouldn't even be an issue, but at the time it still was, even in the mid-90s, and sometimes still is today. But he really paved the way for other people to be brave and come out themselves and to start a movement and to raise awareness about equality.
I want to read to you something that was in the Indianapolis Star newspaper, an editorial just a week ago, because this really upsets me. The celebration was the brainchild of Rodney Wilson, a gay high school teacher from St. Louis. What Wilson wanted in this October and every subsequent October was for public high schools to focus on a gay curriculum detailing the history of homosexual persecution and acknowledging the homosexuality of some historical figures. Parents should scream bloody murder at the first sign of a school in their district prepared to adopt this idea. I am the gentleman.
He kept speaking about it. He wouldn't give it up. He wanted to make it another LGBT history month, just like there's Black History Month and Women's History Month, and any other minority group, they should be included.